Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris and the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2. So the Endorphin Elite 2 and the Metaspeed Sky Paris are both top-tier carbon plate racing shoes. They're best options from their respective brands. The Metaspeed Sky Paris has been a long-term favourite on the channel since it came out last year, whereas the Endorphin Elite 2 just came out this year in 2025, and it's certainly a very interesting carbon plate shoe and one we all think is very fast and quite a different feel to the Metaspeed Sky Paris because of its very soft midsole foam. The Metaspeed Sky Paris is the cheaper shoe at £220 or $250, whereas the Endorphin Elite 2 is £280 or $275. The Metaspeed Sky Paris is a bit lighter. It's 188 grams or 6.6 ounces in a UK 9, whereas the Endorphin Elite 2 is 216 grams or 7.6 ounces in a UK 8.5. You have a 5mm drop on the Metaspeed Sky Paris and a 8mm drop on the Endorphin Elite 2. So with the Metaspeed Sky Paris, you've got a very lightweight Motion Wrap 2.0 upper, a little bit of padding around the heel, not much in the way of heel reinforcement there, and then an FF Turbo Plus midsole foam, which is the best foam in Asics' range, as you'd expect. Very lightweight, bouncy material with a full-length carbon plate running through that midsole. In the Sky Paris, it sits a little bit higher in the foam under the forefoot than it does in the Edge Paris, where you have a bit more of a scooped plate. Then you have an Asics grip rubber outsole. Again, very much the focus here is on weight saving. You even have holes in the rubber in the forefoot there. Good forefoot coverage, not so great heel coverage, doesn't go all the way back, but it has been fine in terms of grip, but you might lose out a little bit on durability there. Then with the Endorphin Elite 2, you've got a knit and mesh upper with a slightly weird rubberized section at the back of it. It's got a booty style fit as opposed to the more traditional tongue you have on the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. Then you have a TPEE foam in the midsole, which is called IncrediRun. It's a very soft foam, probably the softest foam I've come across in a carbon plate shoe, but also very springy. Got a full length carbon plate running through the shoe, and then you've got outsole rubber covering the forefoot and heel. More cutouts on the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2 than you have on the Asics. Actually, quite unusual for a carbon plate racing shoe like the Metaspeed Sky Paris not to have any cutouts, and so it's impressive that it is so lightweight. You've got one on the outside of the Endorphin Elite here in particular.
When it comes to fit, I ran in a UK 8.5 or a US 9.5 in both shoes, which is my regular size for both brands. With the Elite 2, you get enough length in the toe box, you get good clearance across the top of the toes. There's a bit of structure to the toe box, which also kind of keeps those uppers away from the top of your toe. So I had no black toenail woes here, even on the longer distances or longer time on feet. The integrated tongues, it's a different kind of setup to we see to some race shoes, but those wrap and hold for good comfort. Excellent lockdown across the top of the foot. However, the Elite 2 did come up a little bit tight and narrow and squashed around the little toe on the outside edge here. And these uppers, they're quite plasticky, so I did have a little bit of rubbing on those longer runs. Nothing crazy, it was manageable, but I would recommend looking closely at the size if you've got wide feet or if you're a fan of more room for your toes to splay. Now, I found the fit on the Asics spot on, snug and racy enough. The heels hold well for me. I really like that you get this extra padding in the heel collars, so there's no slipping or rubbing. I got the midfoot lockdown dialed in easily, had a smidge of lace pinch deeper into the marathons on longer runs, but it was nothing crazy. The toe box feels airy, the uppers feel nice and light and airy, there's good clearance across the top of the toes. Lengthwise, I'd say they're okay too, though I did get one sort of slightly bruised toenail after one of my marathon tests, but again, nothing too crazy. So overall, in both these shoes, I would recommend staying true to size.
When it comes to the fit of the two shoes, I've got my normal size in the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, and no concerns at all about the fit. I've run a couple of marathons in this shoe. Fits me really well. Very lightweight, comfortable upper. The Endorphin Elite 2, I made the unwise decision to go half a size down, which is sometimes okay for me with Saucony shoes, but that is not the case with the Endorphin Elite. I think it's quite a tight fit in general, especially around the toes with the way it tapers at the front of the shoe there. So I will stick to your normal running shoe size in the Endorphin Elite 2 if you have a narrow foot or a small for your size. I think stick to your normal size in general is probably the right way to go, but if you do have quite a wide foot or value a lot of room in the toe box, this shoe might end up feeling quite tight on the foot. On to the run test then, and these are two very impressive carbon plate shoes. The Metaspeed Sky Paris has been my go-to racer, my favourite racing shoe for the last year and a half or so since wherever it came out. I've run 2 marathon PBs in it, as well as some shorter race PBs, so huge fan of it for sure. A few good races have come out this year though, and one of them is the Endorphin Elite 2, which does feel very different to the Asics. Overall, the Asics is still my go-to as a spoiler for the rest of this video, but there are certainly some interesting differences between them that are worth drawing out. So with the Metaspeed Sky Paris, you do have a firmer ride for sure. You've got a very sinking soft ride with the Endorphin Elite 2. I think in general, the Metaspeed Sky Paris does feel a bit firmer than lots of carbon shoes on the market. It's not at all uncomfortable though. Like I say, I've run a couple of marathons in it and it's always felt very comfortable for me in the second half of those races. What really sets it apart for me is how fast it turns over onto the forefoot, and the amount of spring and lift I feel like I get from the carbon plate setup in the front of the shoe there really feels like I get a nice explosive toe off from the plate. Even when I'm really flagging at the end of races and hard sessions, it feels like even when I'm not running that well anymore, I still get a nice amount of punch from the plate and the foam in the midsole. And the fact it is such a lightweight shoe really helps me as a high cadence runner keep turning my feet over. Endorphin Elite, in contrast, is a very springy shoe. It's very much all about softness and spring with this shoe. You sink in a lot to this Incredi-Run foam and then get it all back though. It's not a shoe that you sink in and the energy gets lost or anything like that. It really does fire you forward with the amount of bounce you have in this midsole, but it is a very different feeling to the Asics, certainly less stable than the Asics I'd short and a lot more unnatural. It feels like a really super shoe, like it feels very unnatural in the way that you sometimes come to expect from these bouncy shoes, but it's so soft and sometimes can have problems with lateral stability. I find like the way you compress the foam, it seems to go a bit everywhere. Like I say, it does bounce back and push you forward, and it is a very fast shoe. Like I've used it for a hard session down on the track and on the road as well, and I do enjoy running in it at pace, but it's certainly one that you have to take a bit more care in, and one that's a little bit more present in your mind when you're running in it than the Asics shoe. Like you are worried about your next step, you're worried about taking corners. I was even a little bit worried about stopping at the end of a rep and that kind of thing in the shoe. That's partly also because I don't think the grip is very good on the shoe. Every run I had on it, it feels like it's just a little bit slippery underfoot, and I don't love that feeling when you're adding in the wobbliness of the foam. It just creates a slight feeling of insecurity. Certainly very fast, certainly a shoe that you could run a PB in, but it's one that you'd be thinking about and worrying about a bit more than the Asics. When I ran in both shoes at the same time, like it is wild how different the Endorphin Elite feels to a top racing shoe like the Metaspeed Sky Paris. Like it is very soft, it is very bouncy, but like I say, you've got that lightning fast turnover in the Asics, just a lovely amount of punch. It just feels like it fits really well with my stride, whilst also giving that extra punch and propulsion you expect from a carbon shoe. Whereas the Endorphin Elite 2 is like stepping into something completely otherworldly, and then you've got to really adjust a little bit to take into account that bounce. Certainly can run fast in it, certainly got that performance level, but certainly a shoe you're going to think about a bit more on the run.
Okay, run test then. In testing, it's safe to say I've put in many more miles in the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. It's the oldest shoe, so both in training and in racing. It's a shoe that I've used last year to clock PBs at the 5k and marathon distance, and it was one of my top shoes of the year for 2024. But I've also logged north of 50 miles in both shoes. I haven't raced in the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2 yet, but I have done some 2-hour long, sort of long mileage marathon training runs at marathon pace, along with an all-out mile and some faster 5Ks, some a bit slower, all of the usual stuff. Now, if you've watched the channel before, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the Metaspeed Sky Paris. It's definitely Asics' best carbon plate shoe to date. It's one of the best options right now for chasing fast times for everything up to the marathon. It has all the ingredients I look for in a good carbon race shoe. You've got light, racy, airy uppers. You've got a big stack of bouncy midsole foam that works with the stiffness from the carbon plate to add some extra pop. I really like the stiffness in the midsole unit. It's different to some of the other carbon plates that are softer, a bit more squishy. You get just right cushioning though that dampens the road impact without leaving your feet feeling kind of completely disconnected from the road. There's still some feel that you're in control. So you get something that's light but cushioned, agile, precise, energetic but controlled. Now if you're confident you're in good racing shape, I think the Metaspeed is a top marathon or half marathon race shoe contender. I'd also happily choose it to race fast over 5k and 10k too. I think it's an all distance shoe. Now the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2 is a totally different beast. This is now probably the softest carbon racer going. That Incredi-Run midsole is all about high compression, high rebound, which creates this kind of wild slingshot sort of a ride. It's big on energy, but it's highly unique. And it does come at the cost of stability and certainty. If you need lots of stability, I don't think this shoe is probably going to be the best race shoe for you. From the moment you lace it up, you're kind of immediately wondering if you're going to be able to control it. You can really feel the softness and the movement underfoot. And when you're moving, that means that you have to focus on your landings. It takes sort of careful, considered foot placement. That's the order of the day with this shoe. That's less the case when you're running mid to forefoot, engaging the front section of the foam, where things I find are a little bit more reliable. You still get a highly resilient and bouncy ride, but there's more control than when you land further back towards the heel. Now, I'd say the Elite 2 is probably as punchy as the Metaspeed Sky Paris, but I think that's the key difference here. It requires attention to your foot placement. You need to focus on what's going on underfoot. When you do and you run well, it's brilliantly fun, energetic, lively, and it's got a ride that I really quite love. I'd 100% pick it for like a big urban marathon where they've got lots of straight line running on even surfaces, you know, the Chicago's, Berlin, New York, those kind of races. But on anything that's kind of twisty, turny or vaguely uneven, I think it's much less reliable than you'll get from the Metaspeed Sky Paris, which just feels a bit more natural. You don't have to focus as much, you can just get on with running. Onto that verdict then, and once you've run a PB in a shoe, it tends to hold a special place in your esteem. And I've set a bunch in the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, so my verdict may come as a little surprise here. But I'm not just choosing the Metaspeed over the Endorphin Elite 2 because it helped me run at my best. I genuinely think that the Metaspeed remains like one of the most accomplished carbon racers that you can get. And I think it's the shoe that will work for the widest group of runners as well. I have enjoyed my miles in the Endorphin Elite 2. It's a high octane shoe when you're really going at it, but I find it kind of requires more focus to get the most out of the shoe. It's somewhat untamed. It's a bit wild. It's kind of a caution to the wind kind of shoe that is a lot of fun. It's just not as natural and easy and effortless as the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. And for that reason, along with a higher price tag that comes with the Elite 2, if I was choosing one shoe to race in over almost any distance, it would be the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. I also think, as I said, the Metaspeed is the shoe that's going to suit the widest group of runners in terms of that sort of accommodating, more stable, easier platform. It's also the shoe that I would trust more on very, very tired legs when I was going to be moving with more ragged form, maybe landing further back in the shoe, where things might just get a little bit more wobbly and you need a bit more consistency underfoot. So for me, the winner is the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris.
When it comes to my verdict, the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris remains my favourite carbon plate racing shoe, and it certainly edges out the Endorphin Elite 2, which I did enjoy running in. I think it's really fast, I think it's really impressive. It's just not quite to my taste. It's also very expensive. The Asics is cheaper, and I think the performance level is higher for me, for a runner like me with a high cadence. In general, I think it's the higher performing shoe of the two. But if you are craving that super soft, bouncy feeling, then the Endorphin Elite 2 provides it more than the Asics. I think it's probably also a shoe I have run in slow paces in the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2, and I think it is quite a friendly shoe to jog around in, or even running at races at those slightly slower paces. Like if you're not worried about stability, if you aren't concerned about rolling your ankle or that kind of thing, I think this is a shoe that will work quite well across a range of runners in terms of their race finishing times. The Metaspeed Sky Paris might be a bit too lightweight and not accommodating enough for some of those runners, where I do think you have that lovely softness with the Endorphin Elite 2 and that bounce. You just got to watch out for that wobbliness as well. But yeah, overall my pick is certainly the Metaspeed Sky Paris. Hard to see a shoe displacing it anytime soon, but then I didn't see the Metaspeed Sky Paris coming in and becoming my firm favourite when it was launched, so we'll just have to see. But the fact it's also a fair bit cheaper, I think definitely puts a dent in the ambitions of the Endorphin Elite 2, which has come out with a really high price tag at the top of the carbon plate racing shoe market. And while it's certainly something different and something that lots of runners will really love, I'm not sure it's the most effective racing shoe for me. The Metaspeed Sky Paris is the one I'd go for. That's a comparison of the Endorphin Elite 2 and the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.